All right, so drawing class. We are now on the phase where you guys should be having your sketch laid out on your final paper. Remember, we are using our compositional layouts. So this was my original that I had designed according to the layout I provided for you guys, and I've sketched it on my final paper. You'll notice that it is still the basic shapes. You don't need to have everything totally refined and ready for detail yet. We're just going to add in an ink wash, okay? So what an ink wash is, whenever you call something wash, it's basically just creating one area of tone or value that's all kind of the same value. So in the same way you might have placed value shapes into your pencil drawing, we are doing that now with ink, okay? And then we will go in later and refine details. You will find this stuff in the printmaking supplies cabinet. Okay, you do not need much. Be really careful with this stuff. If you have something on you're worried about, put an apron on or put one of the paint shirts on because it does not wash out of clothing. Okay, you'll need that. You'll also need a palette in the same cabinet. You will also need some brushes, okay? And there are also some water droppers in that same cabinet, and you'll see why those are helpful as well. I have them in just one of the little plastic cups I will put out for you guys in that cabinet as well. Okay, so one of the first things you want to do, I'm going to scoot this over here. I do have a messy mat down. You guys will want to make sure to get one of those. I will probably have some new ones out for you so that they are flat. Okay, so what I'm first going to do is create some ratios of different ink washes. Okay, so I have my ink in these two wells, and what I'm going to do now is just pour straight water in the other two wells, and I'm going to use my eyedroppers, and I'm just going to pick up a little bit of ink and drop it into some of those other wells. Okay. The reason to do this is it's just going to give you a variety of different pigments. You're going to have some ink that's really gray. You're going to have some ink that's really black. Okay? If you would like to, you can also ask me for a scrap paper. You can kind of test it out a little bit before you get ready to start here, which is always probably a good idea. Okay? So you kind of know what your values look like. All right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be taking my watercolor brushes, and I'm going to think about what areas do I want the highest contrast. The highest contrast is going to give me the biggest focal point, okay? So pretty much I'm going to think about what edges I want to pop out, okay? So I'm going to start here by kind of creating this ground behind the hand because I want that hand to pop out. So I'm going to just kind of go around the edges of where that hand is. Okay, I try to be really light with these brushes when you're at this phase. Just try not to touch them directly to the paper. I also have just plain water here as well. So you want a cup for ink and a cup for water because I like to kind of water down the ink as I'm spreading it around my picture. Okay, I know I'm going to have a fireplace lit over here, so there's going to be a great deal of light coming from here, and this is going to also be in the most light. Okay, so as I am kind of keeping that in mind, I'm going to go in and block out other things. So basically I'm placing my values with this ink wash, okay? Washing out my brush a little bit. I'm using my I would say this one that I'm using right now for this kind of gray is probably about 70% water, 30% ink. So you can see that the ink is going to give you a lot. So you don't need much. If I was doing a 50-50 ratio, this would be almost like black looking. Okay, so what I've done now is plotted out the values according to the light. This hearth is going to be light, I'm going to leave it white. The hand is going to be in focal point, so I'm going to leave it white. Okay, now I'm going to look at some of these other areas and what I want them to have. I want my values to be different here because I want to be able to see the edge of this table. So now I'm going to go into my mixture of ink that is about 98% water and maybe 2% of ink. And you can see it's way lighter, okay? And like I said, I think it's probably a good idea for you to do a little test strip before you start plotting things in here. I'm just trying to kind of give you guys an example to follow there, okay? So I am toning different areas of my paper to create dynamics. Whoops, got a little bit on there. If you do get on something that you don't want, you can take a paper towel if you have one like right next to you and soak it up, but I didn't have one right next to me, so. Okay, all right, so I clearly have some different planes of value. Now to increase my contrast and increase the drama here, I'm going to go in and darken even some of these areas even more. So this one right here, this one is a little bit darker than the last one. okay? So really, we're not worrying about huge details. Woo! Now that one is like 100% ink, so you can see how intense that one is. And if you kind of get it on there and you don't like how intense it is, you can see what I did there. I just washed out my brush. Okay. And you kind of have a paper towel too to kind of wash and wipe your brush. And I'm just going to kind of teeter that into there. It very much operates almost like watercolor, okay? But just kind of laying out those high contrast areas, all right? So I got the corners here very dark to kind of really emphasize my kind of hearth there. Got the hand up here. Okay, so now you're at the point where, you know, my basic values are laid out, okay? So at this point, you can kind of decide whatever else you want to accentuate with your ink, okay? So you maybe, like, I really want the shadow on the fingers to be really intense, okay? You really want the edge around the knuckles to kind of pop up there, okay? So at this point, this probably does look a little bit more like watercolor to you, but I'm still, again, I'm just placing values with my basic shapes still at this point, okay? So you can still change things quite a bit. And if my brush ever gets too full of ink, go ahead and just dip it in your water cup and kind of use that to kind of mellow it out, okay? Again, anything that I want to be a focal point, I want my highest contrast there. So that's why I'm spending some time with this hand. You can see it's already popped up a lot more than it was a second ago. And I'm also kind of keeping my brush strokes going the same direction. If you notice, like all of this area, they're kind of going diagonal up to the peak, just because it kind of keeps a nice rhythm. Here, I kind of keep my brush strokes going towards a circular motion. Just kind of some simple things that you can keep in mind, okay? So for my bowl here, I'm going to crisp this edge, and I want there to be a really dark shadow over here, okay? Because it's kind of out of the picture here, and we don't really see a whole lot else. And as it would be getting farther and farther away from the light or the hearth I have there, it's going to be getting darker, okay? So I'm going to go in now with a bigger brush. Kind of always pick the brush that's best for what you're doing. If you want to go into a larger space, then you want to use a bigger brush. Okay. All right, so now I have a nice little shadow over here. I got the hand coming out. Another place I might want to place my shadow is on the inside of this bowl here. Being careful to keep my edges. Okay, but that's going to help pop up any of the little items that I have that are floating in this bowl, kind of just the edge of where the liquid's going to be in there. Okay, I'm going to go in with my skinnier brush here and just sort of fade that edge out. Okay, so hopefully this looks a lot like how you would have placed value shapes, okay? The ink's just going to get a little more drama, a little bit different texture for you guys to experiment with, so I thought this would be a nice one to go with your Halloween legends, because there is some drama in a lot of Halloween legends, okay? So at this point, I would say it's pretty much laid out as far as my values. You can always go back in and add more ink, but this would be a good stopping point for the day. You'll need to make sure you wash your palettes out in the sink. Like I said, wear an apron if you're worried. And then the eyedroppers go in where the brushes are held to dry out, and the palettes can go in the sink rack. So thank you for listening.